it was like I'd been seeing a lot of lights and just mystery lights, stuff that's amazing, unexplainable lights moving about the trees, and you couldn't go out there on a Wednesday night, it seemed like, without seeing something. And I almost got to where I was looking forward to see what I was going to encounter on Wednesday nights. That was the first night I worked of the week. I'd usually work 2 or 3 nights depending on my schedule. But that Wednesday night, it was like I couldn't go out there without seeing some Wednesday night. So, and it was a Wednesday night, and I was just waiting to see what showed up this week. And I was cruising in my truck to get a load down south of I-20 over here in north central Texas. I was going south from Cisco, Texas, on the interstate down towards a little town called Rising Star, about 20 miles south. And I was headed down this long stretch of highway, and there was a lot of cars behind me. And all of a sudden, and I don't know why I didn't see it or notice it, but there was 6 huge lights way up in the sky over the road in front of me. I mean, I was like, what in the world is that? And where did that come from? It just showed up out of the blue. And I was looking to see if it was reflections off my glass. So I was sticking my head out of the window, and it was still there. And I was like, man. And I even seen a car pulled over like they were looking at it, and they were pointing at it. And I was like, man, I'm not the only one seeing it. There's people pulling off the highway looking at it. So I just kept cruising down the highway, and there was a lot of traffic on the road and a lot of cars behind me and stuff passing me. But as I got further down there's a big church down there, and it seemed like all the traffic turned off at the church. I guess it was just about church time or something. So everybody, all of a sudden the road went from pretty crowded to like nothing. It was like just, nobody on the road but me. And I'm cruising down this highway 183 south of Cisco, Texas, towards the little town of Rising Star, and looking at these big old 6 bright lights up there in the sky. Then all of a sudden 3 more decided to come on, and they wasn't like lights. There was like large areas of illumination. It was like illumination shining out of a huge opening, and these are gigantic openings. I mean, the openings seemed like they were big enough to fly a plane into, each one of them. And so these things, I mean, it was certainly unnatural, and I couldn't think of anything. Helicopters couldn't have a light that big on them, and I've seen helicopters flying to Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene before, and you could hear them from miles away, but it's easily identifiable as helicopters. But this was just odd looking, and there was dim lights when they were gigantic in size, and all of a sudden 9 of them finally had came on, and it stretched far across the highway. I mean, it looked like they stretched a mile across the sky down the road ahead of me. And I was like, what in the world could that be? And I just kept watching it, and all of a sudden 3 of the lights traveled together, broke off in a straight line, and they traveled down, descended to a field to my left out of my driver's side window. And they started descending. They didn't go all the way to the ground, but they stopped what seemed like, I don't know, maybe 100 yards in the air, 200 yards in the sky. And then I could see there's a blue beam shining out of it all the way to the ground. And it was a dark blue beam. It was just bright enough that you could see that it was some sort of beam coming out of it. And then all of a sudden, I looked out there on the ground, and there's a greenish yellow light glowing, and in this glowing light, I could see it looked like a person, but this person looked like it had like a bobblehead on it, huge head for the size for the skinny body, but it had like a huge head and this green glowing light around it. And I thought, my God, this is the strangest thing I've ever watched. And I'm looking around, I'm trying to find a camera. I'm in a spare truck, and there's an accident camera in most of the trucks. But in this spare truck, I couldn't find the accident camera because I was trying to drive, trying to find the accident camera, and trying to watch all this going on at the same time. So I had a lot going on. And I couldn't. Finally, I realized that I went in this truck, and it's a spare truck, and so there wasn't no camera in the thing. I just gave up on being able to get a picture of it, and I just decided I'd watch it. And the thought of I was getting close to where the thing was out in the field. It looked like it was about a quarter mile away out in the field. It was close enough that I could, I wouldn't ride upon it, but it was far enough away that I could see what was going on. and I could see it was a field, but there was a sparsely scattered trees out in the area, and I could see that not far from where the humanoid-looking thing was, there was a tree, and I could see the glow on the tree around this thing, and it was out in the field close to the tree, but it wasn't under the tree. And then I could see the blue light, and then I noticed that in the blue light, about 30 feet off the ground, there was something darker of the light, and it looked like it was moving. And I couldn't really tell what it was, but it was about 30 feet up. And then all of a sudden it came into focus. I guess maybe it spun around to where I got a better look at it. But it was a cow, and it was being lifted up about 30 feet up in the air, and it was whipping its head from side to side. And it wasn't straight up and down. Like if you'd have harpooned a cow or you had roped a cow and you'd picked it up, the weight of the carcass would like just make it almost like a teardrop. You know, it wasn't like that. It was like the front end was lower than the back end, but the back end wasn't hanging perpendicular like it would if you had roped it or harpooned it or anything like that. It was floating up very odd. The head was down, and the cow was whipping its head from side to side. And when I seen that in that blue light, it just, at that point, I knew that I didn't have any business stopping and watching anything. I just really wanted to get the heck. And I looked up at the lights that was over me, and I couldn't see them. I don't think they disappeared. I think I drove under them. I thought I was underneath whatever it was, and you couldn't see the lights from there. I'd gotten into a position where the lights just couldn't be visible on that. I could still see the lights on the craft over the field that had the blue beam coming out of it. But the lights over my head, it was like I had to be underneath this thing. And I thought, man, you know, if I hang around here, I'm going to be just like that cow. I'm going to be next on the list. And so, man, I just put my foot in it, and I just headed down the road, and I kept watching my mirrors and making sure that thing wasn't following me. And I'd seen everything I wanted to see for that night. And like I said, they asked, you know, what happened to the cow? Do you see a carcass? No, I have no idea what happened to the cow. I don't know if it got returned, if it got taken, if it got mutilated. I have no idea what happened to the cow. You know, like I said, the next time I went down there was several days later. You know, I didn't see any buzzards or anything like that down there. I have no idea what happened to the cow at ever. You know, whatsoever happened to the cow. And I filed a MUFON report, but I didn't. I had this friend, he said, do not tell them everything. They will never let you drive a truck again. So I reported it, and, you know, I got the date, and I reported seeing some lights and stuff like that. But it was a very edited MUFON report. You know, there was no way I was going to put that I'd seen a cow getting lifted, you know, in there, because I was like, no, that's not if I want to keep driving a hazmat truck. You know, you don't want to be talking like that. That's not the guy my boss wants working for him driving a hazardous material truck. And so anytime I fill out a MUFON report, it's very edited down to the point where I can look at it and people can tell that I seen something, just wasn't sure what it was, you know, that kind of thing. And it helps me keep track of the date and the time and all that stuff. So that's what MUFON does. It's very good at cataloging UFO sightings, but I don't know if everybody's telling everything. I know in my case at that time it was very edited down. So
yeah, they like to separate what they choose to believe is real versus. Janet calls it the nuts and bolts, but I guess it's some of us oldies that started doing real investigations back in the day for the government and different organizations in the history of the UFOs. And it does, you know, we had CUFOs too, but we had a lot of them before that. Jan Aldrich came on and did a series with me for several weeks, and the UFO Association on here. So listen to Jan Aldrich. He sort of shows the progression of how they went from the old days as a historian, you know, and all the different UFO groups. But we've got UFO Association now. I want to rebuild it with the way it should be, with J. Allen Hynek and Stan and Dr. Bruce Maccabee and different Don Berliner, people like that, and then build up from there. You know, that studied the Roswell forward. It was on the hour. We missed it. But Janet, are you going to stay with us the last hour or not? Yes or no? Do you know? Can you stay?
It just depends on when my workers come. But I'll be here as long as I can. And if I have to step away, I'll come back.
Okay, well, Ronnie, I don't mind producing this weekly and archiving it, folks. If y'all want to show up and tell your stories with Ronnie, you can be the big promoter and all that of You Ain't Gonna Believe This, because I told Ronnie that was a good name. Of course, we said the S word afterwards, because as truck drivers, we used to, when I'd go in all the truck stops, we'd sit around and entertain each other, and somebody would say that, but you got so used to it, depending on how well you knew the people, but a lot of new ones would break in the initiation all over the road in the United States, at least the 8 years I was in, by people coming and sitting down that were new truck drivers. And then somebody would say, "You ain't going to believe this." It would say, cow dung, you know what I'm saying? And to see what would happen. And the young people would always look real curious. And we knew some truck story was going to come up, right? Like even the cow story, right? Or something. So that's how I talked to Ronnie about it, and he said, yeah, paranormal, but UFOs, and we could blend everything, couldn't we, Ronnie? Well, you did today with your ghost stories and stuff, and people will show up at our club, and hopefully we'll grow our club, folks. I'm trying to grow my authors club, and Janet writes books, and I write books, and Ronnie writes books, and we'll have a mention maybe on the hours in the future and stuff about that, but UFO stories, ghost stories, all that's good. Anything folklore, folk life, that kind of stuff. All right. Well, Janet says she'll stay a while, Ronnie. What you want to do now? Because we can tell whatever, I guess.
Well, I can tell, but part of there's an aspect of the it's right after the large craft Passover on March the 2nd, 2011. The one that I got pictures of and stuff, and the craft approached me and scared the hell out of me. There's an aspect to the story I don't get to talk about just because it takes so long to tell the story that this part of the story don't get included a lot. But it was like the third of the craft sightings that I had in a 1 hour period. The second one being the 1 mile mothership that flew right over the top of me. But after the mothership flew over me and had left, and it was time to leave the location. I had my truck loaded. And I was leaving the location, and I hadn't went 5 miles down the road. And there's a double wide trailer house out here. It's a farmhouse, and there's a farmer lives in it, and his land is all around him, plowed fields, all around him, and I'm going down the road, and I just seen all this stuff. So I'm, of course, I'm scanning the skies like crazy, trying to figure out where everything went, because I know they probably still out there. So I get to this double wide trailer house. Probably sits about 300 yards off the pavement. And I can't really drive my truck up to the house. But when I looked at the house, it looked like a dim star over the top of it, and I thought, man, that is not it. That looks way too close to be a star in the distance. And so I slowed the truck down, and I stopped at these people's driveway in my truck. And then I got my spotlight, and I started shining my spotlight at this star. Well, sure enough, this thing, it wasn't a star. It was something over the top of these people's double-wide trailer house. And it was probably maybe 100 feet above their house. And when I shined the light on this thing, I couldn't see a craft, but when I shined the light on this thing, it decided it was time to leave, and there's a triangle opening in the bottom of this thing, and it had round circular lights all along the triangle opening. Now the triangle opening on this thing was big enough that you could have put a Cessna airplane in it, and this is right over the top of these people's house. Now the craft was so dark that I couldn't see what the craft looked like, but I could literally stand there and look, and the lights, the round lights that was incorporated into the triangle opening on the bottom of it were bright enough that I could see the light inside the craft. I could actually see inside the craft, whatever the heck it was, and it had this most amazing array of plumbing network. It looked like the inside of a Porsche race car or something like that. It had turbo lines all over the wall. It spun into at one point it spun into a tight circle like a cochlea of the ear and the inner eardrum. And there was just all this stuff built right onto the walls of the crack. I mean, it wasn't anything. It was